Hello! I'm Elaine, and I'm a tour guide in the French Quarter. I do ghost tours. And I am not going to tell you the stories that I tell on my tour, because you gotta pay for those. But if you want to hear some interesting things that have happened to me while I'm leading random drunk people around the French Quarter, I got you.
So I've done a couple of private tours recently, and the thing about private tours is they can be amazing. If for no other reason than a few private tours are celebrities. And it is really fun to be able to say, like, yeah, I've done a tour for Mandy Moore, for Jason Alexander, for the Property Brothers. I did a tour that was supposed to appear on a season of Sex Education, but for some reason that entire plot line got cut. Which means that, yes, I have met the person who currently plays the Doctor. I'm cool like that. But more importantly, most private tours are not that interesting. 90% of private tours are going to be school groups, corporate events, or really big bachelorette parties. And all of those groups, objectively, are terrible to have on tours, which is why a lot of the companies will actually pay tour guides extra if they're doing a private tour. But the private tours I've done recently have been interesting. One was not even really a private tour. It was just my sister and my nephew and my dad were in town, so I was taking them around telling them stories. But the fun thing about that is there's a bit of a tradition in the French Quarter with tour guides that when you pass by a tour guide you sort of stop and say, like, oh, you have the best tour guide in the city. Or the other one is you say, be sure to tip your tour guide. They owe me money. And it happened like 4 or 5 times, and I kept having to tell people, like, this is not actually a tour, it's just my family. But the good news is that made my sister and everyone think that I was super popular. But the big private tours I've done recently, there have been a couple of them. One was a night I was not even supposed to work. It was my usual day off, but also it was the week I'd asked off because my sister and nephew were in town. But my boss didn't have anyone else to do it, and I needed the money. So I was like, okay, let's do this. And it was actually a really fun group. They were all principals and school administrators, and the tour I was doing was a true crime tour. And they were all super into it, though it is always funny because sometimes with true crime tours, it hits different than podcasts and YouTube videos. Like when you're standing in front of the building, it just sometimes feels more viscerally real. And I could see the moment with these people when it went from like, wee, fun, true crime stories to, oh, this is real. These were people. And, like, it was fine. They had fun, but you could see the seriosity hitting them. But the moment I want to tell you about is we were walking by a shop that has the word voodoo in the title. Keep in mind, this is not a voodoo shop. This is, in fact, a clothing store and a sort of souvenir-y style shop. But it's New Orleans, so they have voodoo in the title. And the woman who's walking right next to me looks over and sees it and immediately crosses herself. And I'm not going to say anything about this because, like, I don't want to start that conversation. But I guess she saw my expression because she immediately was like, oh, yeah, I just don't want to be cursed. Like, I'm not into that evil stuff. And I'm like, it's not evil. And she's like, I'm really spooked out by, like, voodoo dolls and stuff. And I'm like, it's not, like, believe it or not, Hollywood did make a few things up. Voodoo is just a religion, and it's a perfectly peaceful religion. And I will give her all the credit in the world because she listened and she said, oh, okay, that's not what I've heard. And I'm like, yeah, that's because it is a highly demonized religion. And she just listened to me talk for a few minutes and then was like, okay, I just didn't know that. But the other true crime, the other big private tour I did was a school group. And of the types of groups, school groups are the most temperamental. They can be amazing. They can be absolute hell. And you are not getting tips for them, no matter what, pretty much. And this one was a very big group. It was divided amongst, I think, 3 guides. And I get the first group, and I'm heading out first. And I was a bit worried because it was a bit warm out. But keep in mind, it was only a bit warm for July. Like, I think the heat index was like 102, 103. And for July in New Orleans, that's not bad. And this was a 5 p.m. tour. So, like, it's beginning to not be as hellishly hot. And they are a school group, and when they arrive, they are all wearing matching t-shirts, and I did notice pants. Like, all the kids were in pants, not shorts, to the point of I assume it was a dress code, though ironically, like, 3 of the chaperones were wearing shorts, and I'm like, that seems a bit unfair. But when I start my tour, I take them outside and I'm going to the place I was planning on doing the rules, and I notice it's way too sunny. So I was like, we're just going to go around the corner. It'll be fine. And one of the kids is being very much like, oh, thank you, because it was way too hot there. And the second stop, I was like, okay, there's a shady spot and there's a sunny spot. And I could not take them to the shady spot because there was somebody sleeping there. And, for some unknown reason, most school groups don't really like being planted next to someone passed out on the sidewalk. But that did mean they were in direct sunlight, and I will admit, yeah, they looked like they were frying. But it was only one more stop after that when one of the chaperones, who has spent this entire tour, like, she has not taken a moment when she is not directly on the phone talking at pretty normal volume just at the back of the group. And like, I'd heard a couple of phrases from her so that I knew that she was talking about the heat and complaining about the heat. And as we're walking to like the third stop, she pulls me aside and is like, oh, can I talk to you privately for a moment? I'm like, yeah. And she sounds really concerned, so I'm sitting here like, did I accidentally drop an F-bomb in front of these kids? What's going on? And she's like, it's really hot. One of the girls on the other tour has already passed out. We need to stop this. All the tours are canceled. We're just ending this. And I'm like, oh, okay. Sure. And she's like, no, it's fine. You'll still get paid. We just need to take the kids back to the bus. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Do whatever. And she's like, well, just like, is it okay? And I'm like, yeah, like, you do whatever. Like, you are in charge of this. And what I was secretly thinking is, and the quicker you say we're done, the quicker I get to go back to the air-conditioned shop. I'm fine. And the awkward thing is, when we went back to the group to tell them that the tour was over, about half the kids were like, no, it's not. We want to see the tour. We're excited. And they ended up like arguing for like 5 minutes and eventually just taking a poll as to who wanted to stay and who wanted to go. And they did phrase it like that. So I thought that I was going to end up with a smaller group and like one chaperone, and the other chaperone was going to take the other kids back to the bus. But no, that's not what happened. They just didn't have enough kids that wanted to stay, so they took them back to the bus. And I went back to the shop prepared to be like, okay, well, I'll wait for the other tour guides to get back, because I had been told all the tours were ended. Turns out that's not what happened. My tour was the only one that called it quits. One of the other guides had a few kids bow out and go back to the bus, and the other tour made it all the way to the end. And so it seems that one chaperone was just like, it's too hot, we're not doing this. But I was fine with it because I got to sit in the shop for like 3 hours before my next tour. And the shop has air conditioning. So, yeah, private's not always great, but not always the worst either. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and be sure to check out my book, Drunks of the French Quarter Theater, available on Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble, pretty much wherever.